I'm Mark Dresner, and this is DDP TV, giving you the authoritative voice of leaders and experts in the drug development and delivery industry. DDP TV is brought to you by the Drug Delivery Partnerships Conference, which is, of course, as the name suggests, focused on the latest developments in drug delivery technology and how to partner between sponsors, clients, and vendors. Joining me today is Michael Kaufman. He is Vice President of Pharmaceutical Sciences at Millennium Pharmaceuticals. Michael, welcome to DDP TV.
Hi, Mark. My pleasure.
Great to have you. For our audience, Millennium, of course, focuses on oncology research. So while some of these questions may be broadly applicable to the industry, I'll remind our audience that Michael's responses are coming from an oncology research perspective, correct? Yeah. So as you see it, what are some of the key challenges, issues facing the industry in terms of discovery, in terms of development, in terms of delivery, and how well are we addressing them?
Sure, Mark. So again, coming at it from an oncology perspective, I would say that one of the biggest challenges is the shift from general medicine to personalized therapy. And this is going on in many areas of medicine, but more so in oncology, where targeted therapies for patients are replacing the old class of cytotoxic, cell-killing cancer therapies that were the traditional mainstay of this sort of therapy. So that brings with it a lot of consequences. One of it is that we're generally speaking targeting a very focused patient population, and that means that we're going into areas of unmet medical need. And from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges is that oftentimes we're trying to launch drugs based off of only phase 2 data. So unmet medical need, high efficacy, small studies, get it on the market. That's very challenging for a product development group, which tries to do a lot of its development during the later phases of the clinical trials. So as a consequence, when we're using drug delivery technology, we tend to be incorporating it very early in the product development cycle before we fully know the characteristics of the product to be. So I think it's a great thing for patients. It's a great thing for the pharma companies, but it's challenging for the people who make the products.
Absolutely. And so the how at this stage, if I can ask, how are the drug delivery providers that you're enlisting in cases responding, to being brought in at such an unusually early stage?
Yeah, it's an interesting question in many ways. I would say in one sense they like being in the early part of it. It's exciting to them. They feel that they're more a partner with us as opposed to a service provider.
Right.
And they're discovering things as we're discovering things. So it's very motivating to them. On the other hand, some of the business aspects get very challenging. So how do you handle the IP questions when the IP is developing in real time?
Sure.
How do you discuss royalties for products when you don't know whether the market is going to be huge or very small? You don't know whether you're trying to give 3% of a big market away or 10% of a small market. So both sides, I think, have to bring a lot of flexibility to make these sort of early partnerships work.
Based on your experience to date, how well would you say that kind of dynamic is playing out?
So, in general, very well. Of course, it depends on specific companies.
Sure.
I will name no names, but I've dealt with a few companies where they've made the hurdle to partnering with them so high, they want so much up front that you have to say, no, this just doesn't make sense for where we are. But most companies really are lowering the bar. They want to get in, they want to be part of the development cycle, and so they won't make it too onerous in terms of the legal, financial requirements to get a partnership going. And I think, again, that's good for everybody in the long run.
Absolutely. And, as you pointed out, you're really trying to navigate uncharted territory here. So there are very complicated issues attached to all of this, and it actually sounds like it's happening perhaps better than one might have anticipated if one looked at it as an issue.
I think a lot of it is driven by cancer. Everyone wants to cure cancer, and I know my staff are so motivated to come in the morning to know this is what they're working on, because it's a disease that touches so many people, and then almost everyone you talk to, themselves, their families, somebody's affected. So the motivation factor is very high. And it's once you get past that, then the technical hurdles you could tackle. And if you tackle them together in good faith, working towards a common cause, usually you could get past a lot of the other things.
Are there other trends, broader trends perhaps, in drug delivery and development that are of interest to you that you're monitoring or watching?
Yeah, so I'll share with you one that I'm particularly interested in. I would say, again, looking back 10 years, the old way of delivering drugs was with these cytotoxic agents that were put in IV bags and delivered by injection in a hospital, doctor's office, or other appropriate facility.
Right.
More and more, we're seeing the drugs being delivered in oral formulation, so standard tablets and capsules that the patients are taking home. And that is great because
self-administered.
The quality of life is so much better when you're not going to the hospital every 3 days for a course of chemotherapy.
Right.
You're medicating yourself, but it brings a lot of challenges with it too. One of the ones I'm most interested in is compliance. So people taking their medication at the right time. I'm sure most of the listeners do know that compliance is an issue in all sorts of medicine. People tend to skip a dose, double up on a dose when they forget if they took it or not, things like that. If you're taking a cholesterol-lowering pill and you miss a dose, you know,
not the same as chemotherapy.
Not a big deal. If you start missing your cancer therapy, or even worse, forgetting you took a pill and taking another one, we got some issues, and particularly with cancer being somewhat skewed towards the elderly population, who might forget things a little more frequently than me, or maybe not, but in general, it's an issue. So I would say looking for ways in which maybe modern electronics, microelectronics, wireless communication, all sorts of things could help patients take their drugs at the right time on the right day is going to be something where I see a lot of opportunity to really help people.
Yeah, so you're talking about, for instance, a mobile app or something like that, perhaps, some sort of,
There's rudimentary steps now, so there's like keychains that you could program, and then they'll buzz you at noon or whatever, and the feedback I've gotten from them is that they're really annoying, so it's not where we want to be. At the other end of the spectrum are wireless devices in which if you take off,
unscrew the cap.
The cap talks to a wireless device. The wireless device talks to a hospital or doctor. Everyone knows when you've taken it, or more importantly, when you haven't taken it. Again, some hurdles there. If you think of the elder population and how many of them are comfortable with Wi-Fi and
of course,
I know
how many of the
my
younger
mother doesn't even have an ATM card, much less a Wi-Fi connection. But these are things that'll change as we move on, and so I'm really looking to get at the forefront and drive some of that so that people can take home these medications that are a little more difficult to use than the standard sorts of pills and capsules.
Yeah, you're clearly enthusiastic about it. Are you optimistic about the progress we're making?
I'm incredibly optimistic when I see how small things get every day, and then how clever the microelectronics industry is. It seems to me that the technology is there, the application is moving there with more and more oral chemotherapy, and so when you marry the two, someone's going to jump in soon, and I hope personally I could be a catalyst.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads me into a very similar question, which is, can you talk to us a little bit about current market dynamics that you're seeing? These could be specific to your space or even broader if you want to go broader.
Yeah, okay. Let me focus on one really interesting market dynamic, is that I think drug companies now are cooperating with each other more than ever in the space of cancer. Cancer has always been a disease that's been treated by combinations of therapies, so it's unusual you just get a drug for cancer, and I think the viewers would know that usually it's 2, 3 drugs. More and more people are looking not at the standards but at these new drugs and saying this drug A combined with this drug B should sit in the middle of a mechanistic pathway, and if you close them both down, I think we got something really special. The trouble is that the compound A might be with company A and compound B might be with company B. And unless they cooperate, those 2 drugs aren't going to come together in the way that favors the patient, the 2 companies. So individual companies are realizing this now, that more than ever they can collaborate and create these win-win situations for everybody. And it's really interesting to see. And it's really interesting at the start of it, the kind of visceral shock at it, you know, let's disclose all this to our competitors. But as people thought about this, it makes more and more sense. So that's something that I'm looking to see more and more of.
Interesting, and let's, if I could close with that, let's talk about that kind of partnering trend. If you want to, let's talk about partnership strategy. So how are things changing as you're looking at that dynamic and other, you know, more conventional partnering dynamics? What needs to change? What's exciting to you? And any thoughts about relationship management from your perspective, please?
Right, all great topics. So we've already talked about partnership between companies. We've talked a bit about partnership between the sponsor pharma company and the drug delivery company.
Right.
All of this is changing. We've talked a little bit about moving drug delivery systems earlier and earlier into the development cycle. So bringing it full circle, how do you manage all these complex relationships? For me, it's always started with honesty, which means that sometimes you have to give bad news in a sincere but stern manner. Look, this is just not working the way we want it to. I think the other key to success is to make sure there's a common understanding of what success does look like for both parties, so that you don't get to a point where Company A says, oh, this is exactly what we needed. Company B is, this is nowhere what we expected. And these things do happen, so setting those common expectations up front and good, continuous, honest feedback throughout the process, I think gets you to a place where both parties get what they want.
Are you finding that these disconnects are posing a significant impediment to your progress, or are they something that when they arise, you can pretty much manage and kind of do on the fly?
You have to manage them. You really can't let that get in the way of this nobler mission of helping patients and getting the new technologies their way. It's just sometimes more difficult than others, of course, and some people handle it better than others. So the human dynamic really plays into it. I think most people are, by nature, somewhat conflict avoidant and don't like to give out bad news. And certainly scientists in particular, I don't think, get a whole lot of training on the psychology of disappointment.
Right.
But they're starting to get some good on-the-job training.
They live with it, though,
as they do these partnerships. So it's interesting.
Would you say, one final question, would you say that, or what advice might you have for a, let's say, another pharmaceutical company, a company that's developing a molecule, or perhaps even a delivery technology company that is looking at sort of one of these earlier stage, more unique types of partnerships that you touched on? Because it is, again, new territory.
Right. I would say start with the patient and work backwards. What is the life experience of this patient? How will this technology benefit them? So we talked about making it easier to take tablets. Would be a very simple but concrete example of something that will help a patient. And then start walking backwards. How do I help them take the tablets? What technology is available? If it's not available, is it potentially an offshoot of existing So you could go through there, and then we start narrowing our list down to people who we might want to partner with, and hopefully we find people who we have a good relationship with. But it really starts with understanding the need of the patient and walking backwards to where you are now and building that vision of what the road looks like ahead.
Michael Kaufman, you've given us some really interesting things to think about here, and I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about this particular topic, quite a bit more coming up in the future. So thank you very much for joining us and for our audience.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
It's been a pleasure. On that note, we will conclude this episode of DDP TV. If you'd like more information about drug delivery partnerships, please visit us at iirusa.com/DDP. Until next time, I'm Mark Dresner. Thanks for joining us.